You're listening to a podcast from thespoilist.com. Cyberspace, the new frontier. These are the voyages of the podcast First Contact. Its mission? To explore every episode of Star Trek The Next Generation. To seek out new viewers and have new conversations. To boldly view what many have viewed before. Welcome to First Contact, the Star Trek The Next Generation introcast, where three people subject themselves to a television show that they thought they might like, but actually turns out that they didn't. I'm Andrew.
I'm James.
And I'm Alex.
This week we are watching The Measure of a Man. It first aired the week of February 13th, 1989. It was written by Melinda M. Snodgrass and directed by Robert Shearer. James, what happens in this episode?
Don't sound so enthusiastic. The Enterprise visits the new Starbase 173 near the neutral zone for routine maintenance. Whilst docked, Commander Bruce Maddox proposes to take Data apart so we can work out what makes him tick. Data refuses, even though Maddox promised to put him back together when he was done. Even the little twiddly bits. Data resigns, but is deemed to be property of Starfleet, so must undergo the experiments. Picard challenges, and then there's a trial with loads of talking and looking serious. Will Data get the rights he already had before? Find out now in First Contact. Or, watch the episode itself.
You'd probably be better watching the episode itself before you listen to this podcast. I don't know. Do people listen? So, Alex, it's a trial on a starbase. What did you think of this episode?
Yeah, trial episode. That's not normally a good start, is it? But actually, no, it was a good episode. It's one of the better ones that we've had. Hopefully, the point where the series sort of takes off properly after a false start with Elementary Dear Data, where we thought, oh, this is the point, and then no, it really wasn't.
Well, interesting you should say that you think it's a jumping off point. By some, this is regarded as the best episode of Star Trek of all time. Could you get behind that view?
I didn't think it was inherently better than some of the best ones we've had. I thought it was probably on par. I mean, I'm not saying that there aren't some logical issues with some of the stuff in the episode. I just thought, yeah, it's a good talky episode. But then I think we've had some good action-y episodes and whatnot.
Like Code of Honor.
The slavery link.
The episode begins with a poker game. The crew are interacting. They are friends. They have hobbies. They do stuff together. Seems like a reasonable start to me. It's nice to see them doing stuff not on the bridge.
Why am I not surprised that Riker's favourite card game is 5-card stud?
Well, any opportunity to poker.
Yeah, he doesn't like Texas Hold'em though. He prefers Hold'em.
Did we just hit the pun limit there?
Might have done.
This is a good episode. There's nothing to talk about with this episode. It's good.
It is good. And this is problematic for us, and I'm sure listeners, you will realise that we generally make a better podcast when there's lots to dissect and there's lots to discuss. But really, this episode doesn't have a lot, and if we did, we would be really petty. And I mean, we are really petty, and we'll get to some things, but it's a good, well-made, well-written episode. What do you want from us right now?
No, I think we should just go through and say, I like that bit, I like that bit. Because, do people actually want us to enjoy the episodes? Do they tune in and think, Oh, I hope they like it this week and just say nice things about the thing that I like. When people download a Code of Honor, did they think, oh, I hope they really like that fight with Tasha Yar? That's my favourite bit.
I would say we're here to provide a knowledgeable and sometimes humorous critical analysis. So we're going to call something if we think it's off, and we're going to praise when we think it's good. It's just that praise is just a little bit less interesting to talk about in some ways. So let's talk about characters. We have a couple of significant guest stars in this role. We have Bruce Maddox, who wants to take Data apart, and we have Captain Philippa Louvois, who has a conflicted past with Picard, which makes things interesting. Characters who inherently bring conflict. Let's talk first about Philippa. What did you make of her, Alex?
I think she started off like one kind of character that we've met before, which is, oh, Picard's old flame, and then turned into another kind of character we've had before, which is someone who you are struggling to get logic through to until the final act. I thought she was sort of a fairly inconsequential element of the episode. But I did enjoy the line about what would Picard do? Maybe bust a chair across my teeth. I mean, just picture that for a minute. Patrick Stewart busting a chair across someone's teeth.
You know, I really couldn't imagine Captain Picard in a bar fight. I mean, that just would never happen. You would never see him, especially with, like, a Nausicaan. You know, that would never happen.
That'd be crazy. He'd probably get stabbed in the heart.
Yeah. I mean, imagine if Captain Picard had a mechanical heart now.
I think that's a bit ridiculous. I mean, Geordi is a visor, but a mechanical heart is an absurd proposition.
Yeah.
Anyway, I quite liked her as a character. I like her because it creates conflict. We're using the backstory of the characters to some effect, at least. She presided over the court-martial for the loss of the Stargazer, which we already know about. So I'm glad, you know, the writers have been paying attention to their own work. I like that sort of thing. I know I sound patronising again, but it's just my tone of voice. I can't really talk any other way. So the other character, the driver of the episode, Commander Maddox. You always hear writers and directors now saying in commentaries or interviews before a film comes out, oh, we don't think of them as a villain, they just have a different motivation. And you think, well, sometimes I just want a villain. But here, not so much a villain as kind of an ignorant, arrogant idiot.
An arse, I think, is the phrase we're looking for there.
Yeah, and he doesn't actually have to do much. The performance, I think, is fine, but quite slight, I would have said, but enough lines there to give him a motivation that you genuinely believe that he's a pretty horrible person. But he does remind me of characters we've encountered before in this show, like, say, Pulaski.
He is perhaps too much of a prick. He comes across too much on that villainous side at times, whereas perhaps if he were playing it as a softer character, someone who genuinely believes that there's good to be done, maybe it would make the debate seem a bit more two-sided. I mean, that is the one thing, isn't it? That it's interesting to discuss the debate there, but you're really only thinking about the one side of it throughout the whole thing.
That is true, and the writers almost have done that thing where if he was a lot more worthy and respected and actually had a point, then it might have made for a more interesting philosophical debate rather than him sitting there looking smug and calling Data it all the time, which does instantly put the audience against him.
I'll be honest, I think at times, not the whole time, but at times, they've done that slightly better with Pulaski. Slightly. Is it null and void, that point? Does it really matter? Perhaps not in the overall thing. He's a plot device, really. and I don't really consider him as much more than that.
Well, that seems like a pretty good analysis of the character, and guest stars continue to play an important part. I would say in this episode, Guinan, recurring star now, does play a pivotal part in this episode, whether you like it or not. Some might have a problem with this scene, but I think it's almost a necessary scene. Exposition is difficult, especially in a science fiction show like this, and in this case it isn't the usual kind of techno-babble, but you need to have a scene where the plot is explained to the audience. But is this one a little bit too on the nose? Picard meets Guinan in 10 Forward to discuss the merits of the case.
Well, it's not so much just explaining the plot to the audience as explaining the plot to Picard, isn't it? It's at that point she's sort of sitting him down going, look, now, let me tell you what this episode is about, because you've missed the point entirely.
I mean, at this point in the show, Deanna Troi has nothing to do. This was supposed to be kind of her area, wasn't it? She was the counsellor. She understands how everybody feels. She was supposed to be the one who can explain things.
Was she even in this episode?
I think she was there somewhere.
Is she in the scene where she says goodbye to Data? They have a party for Data to leaving. I don't know where Data's going to go when he leaves. Is he just going to hang out in the starbase? Are they going to get him to Earth in the next 6 months or so?
They're going to grind him down and turn him into glue.
I think the point stands that even if Troi is in this episode, and frankly none of us remember if she is or not,
we had to check
that Guinan is performing the part that she should have played, and we've seen that in episodes already. People go to Guinan for advice. The classic, we visit the bartender to talk about our problems. Nobody in the entire run so far has talked to Troi, and she's the counsellor. What is her role on the show? If Guinan has taken her one area of expertise other than sensing obvious things, which Guinan also can do, then is that a problem? Is it a problem that in an episode that deals with is this person conscious, they don't ask the empathic counsellor?
That's because Troi doesn't have any alcohol. She just has chocolate.
She's not. She doesn't even have chocolate yet.
She doesn't have chocolate yet. She has nothing.
She's got a cat suit.
She does have a cat suit, which is nice. Probably a point we should make. They are only really using 3 of the regular cast in this episode, but I'm okay with that. I think the secondary characters are used in quite a nice way. I mean, you do get a nice moment with Geordi, who's sad in the corner because he's going to miss Data after he resigns. A single plot. They have one plot throughout the entire episode, and it comfortably fills the episode.
And it is rather amusing that the 4th most significant main cast member is one who's dead.
Was that? Did she come in specially to film that, or did they just take something they had?
That is the same footage from the Windows 95 background.
Right. Okay. I was going to say, because otherwise that must be a real kick in the teeth. You had to come back and, we want you for this episode. Oh, well, maybe I'll come back. No, just stand there. I haven't got no, I just want you to stand. Won't people just think I'm a still image? Well, no, you can move your hand. But...
Interesting, though, that Tasha Yar, whom Data mentions he was intimate with, they're actually using Tasha. Actually, this is very probably the most significant contribution Tasha Yar has made to an episode, and she's not in it. She's just a little hologrammatic plinth.
So what we're saying is that Tasha Yar works best in this series when she's not actually there.
She fills a void, just like Data filled hers. In that she is something lost, she is something that matters. She is a character who has significance by her absence more than she did while she was present.
Well, I mean, it sort of plays into what we've said before, that the show functions better with a smaller cast, and in reality it was better when she went. A good motivator, not necessarily the best thing to have in there, though, as an actual character.
Again, the show is already using its own mythos now. It's digging into its backstory.
Yeah, and that's how it works best. Having that as part of a backstory. To draw a parallel with Red Dwarf, many people would say the same thing with that Kochanski works better when when she's someone who's already died and is a motivator for Lister rather than actually being there.
I hope we're going to see Data pursuing Tasha Yar. That's his one dream.
I hope they somehow manage to bring that up in every episode from this point. Like they just turn around to Data and he goes, "I'm not sure if I should mention this, but we were intimate." Did he get this plinth right after he was cured of this virus, or did he get it after she died?
Well, I think it's the recording of her little, her death rattle speech that she did, saying how special everyone was, and how innocent Data was, even though she'd used him as a sex aid. I guess he downloaded it afterwards. It would be creepy to carry around a hologram of a woman while she was still alive. It's much better to carry around holograms of dead women.
What, like keeping a photo of your ex inside a cupboard?
Quite like that, yeah.
The cupboard of sin.
Well, I don't think Data carries it around with him all the time.
One of my complaints, and maybe it's not a complaint, because you tell the stories that present themselves with the most interesting characters, but the last really good episode in this series was Elementary Dear Data, a Data-heavy episode, and again, Data heavily featured in this one, but I would say it's actually more of a tour de force for Picard. It's an episode about Data, but Data doesn't actually feature as the main character as such.
You're just repeating what you've read by Melinda Snodgrass.
Have I? No, I genuinely haven't. Did she say that?
She does say that. I think it's her who says it, yeah.
Since you've mentioned her, this episode written by Melinda Snodgrass, her first screen credit. Now, she's come in, having never written for TV before, and written this. What do you think the rest of the writer's room were thinking when they read this?
I think they were thinking, strike, 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 because it was written during the writer's strike.
We are fundamentally a lefty podcast, of course.
I think that it is surprising that this got a nomination by the Writers Guild for best episodic script when it was basically written on the sly.
I mean, it's good, but was it the best thing? Well, I don't know. Maybe it was. I don't know.
I would say it is good, and as talky trial shows go, it is an exemplar of the form. But I think Star Trek can do more. I think there are more interesting things to do with the show. This is great. It does all the things Star Trek does well. It's a metaphor for something else, although they do make it quite clear what that metaphor is by talking about slavery quite a lot. But it's doing the things that Star Trek does well in a particular way. But yeah, you think there's more to come, I would say.
I think the show's at its best when it's Picard giving a speech or Picard talking to Guinan. The other bits are the bits that I would consider as just being good, whereas the bits with Picard are the bits that I think are great. And maybe it's a little uneven in that respect. I mean, don't get me, I'm purely talking in the terms of, was it the best episodic drama written that year? It could have been a very dull year for drama, for all I know.
Well, it was, considering there was a writer's strike.
Fair point.
It is at least nice that, we've been talking about this writer's strike since about halfway through season 1, about how it's basically destroying every single episode as we go along. And we now actually have something good that has come out of it.
Picard delivers the great speech, and Patrick Stewart, man, does he give gravitas to a speech. I don't know if the dialogue was great, but he certainly makes you think it was. But let's talk a bit about Riker. He's charged with making the argument that Data is a machine, that he is just property. What did you think of Jonathan Frakes' performance? Did he make the great argument that Picard thought he had made?
Well, on Jonathan Frakes, I think actually previously I was a little unfair, because actually I quite liked his stuff, and I like the fact that he's conflicted about the fact that He doesn't want to do it, but he has to do it because otherwise the decision's going to be taken out of his hands, basically. That said, was his argument that strong? Not really, was it? I mean, let's be honest. And can you say that his case is fully planned out in advance? Because when Maddox goes up and he's being questioned by Picard, he's really not thought through what he's going to be asked. I mean, because it would seem the whole consciousness thing, surely that is one of the basic questions he's probably going to be asked. Hasn't even prepared an answer, doesn't even try to wing it. It's a shoddy prosecution.
Well, I think it goes back to the idea that he is a bit arrogant. Just a bit.
I suppose that does raise the other question you might have about this episode. Data is in Starfleet. Data applied for Starfleet and went through the academy. So, would they let something they didn't believe was a life form apply? Surely, once he's been accepted into Starfleet, that is a tacit confirmation that he is indeed a living organism.
Are you telling me you didn't read that story in the Birmingham Echo about the toaster that sat its A-levels?
In some ways, Riker should have prepared his witness a bit better. I mean, it did hinge on basically he's made of metal, he's got super strength, and you can switch him off. Which is sort of setting up a straw man, because none of those facts were ever actually being disputed, because you knew he was made of metal. It's, can androids be sentient, was the argument he was trying to make, which he didn't really manage to make any inroads into. He didn't really even engage with that subject.
And yet at the end the judge says that the trial has all along been about, does Data have a soul? I don't remember that being the issue at the start.
And if that is the trial, surely she could make that with anybody. You know, is there such a thing as a soul?
I'm fairly certain that no court in the land is going to allow a sort of metaphysical odyssey like that through somehow.
I demand that Troy is property of me, and it's because she hasn't got a soul. And you can't prove it.
There's a lot of models in this episode. Do you like the models? I always like some models, although it does look, to me, like the Enterprise has been stuck onto a merry-go-round.
It's nice to see a proper space station, I suppose. A bit of variety. It's not the thing that sticks out in my mind. For my mind, most of the episode is sat in the courtroom. It's not a courtroom, but in the courtroom.
In the battle bridge.
Even if it weren't on the battle bridge, let's be honest, that's not a courtroom. We just pick any old members of crew. We haven't got the staff here yet. They're coming next week. Anyone will do. It's
that very thing that you've arrived at the one space station that doesn't have anyone on it, apart from someone who can preside over a trial. You've got the Judge Advocate General and nobody else, and an Admiral who pops in for about 10 seconds and then disappears. No, there's nobody here. Oh, we'll have this trial here anyway, even though there's nobody here, so we can use our regular characters for reasons. Well, let's sum it up. I liked the episode. It was a well put together hour of television. Everyone who agrees say aye.
Aye.
You know, I think that it is one of the best episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation. And certainly, Alex, you don't seem to quite like it as much as pretty much every Star Trek fan.
I can only compare it to what we've seen so far, and I would say that there's at least one, if not two other episodes that I would say that were roughly on the same level. I thought that the last third of it was when it really took a step up.
That seems reasonable.
Quickfire.
Why didn't they just go and find Law? Because he's floating around somewhere in space, isn't he? So surely they can remember where they left him. Just go and find him and dismantle him?
I think he must be dead.
Well, he's not alive, is he? That's the argument.
How come Chief O'Brien gets invited to the poker game and Troy doesn't?
because she can read Riker's thoughts.
No, she can't. She can't read thoughts. She can read feelings.
No, because she remember in Encounter at Farpoint where they're in the turbo lift and Riker and Troy are talking while I think it's Picard is standing in between them.
I don't remember that, no. Why do they need to dismantle Data at all? It didn't really play on my mind until Riker's looking through the schematics and smiling as he's looking at the absolute precise details of everything that's made him up. If that's the case, do they not know everything about his makeup? Or at least have the basic instructions to go and construct another one?
Well, it's the brain that they need to dismantle more than anything.
But surely they have the schematics so they'd be able to assemble a complete replica.
No, they don't have the schematics of the positronic brain. That's the problem, as they will go into in a couple of future episodes.
Fair enough.
What this episode really missed was a guy coming in a wheelchair and just beeping.
These are the words of Maurice Hurley.
Stunning. That's the kind of show you want to do. It just worked great. Everything about it. And it dealt with an issue in a very interesting way. I thought Whoopi's Place was good in that. She's a wonderful actress.
Whoopi's Place. Okay. Whoopi's Place in it was perfect. Because she was black, and so were the people from slavery.
Has Data's off switch moved? Remember when Lore switched him off and he was right up his back and Riker just hits him in the back of the head? Has he got many off switches?
And does he just take off the arm as a distraction to switch him off? Was there any point to that?
I think it was a laugh.
After he turned him off, he just picked up the hand and went, "Stop hitting yourself. Stop hitting yourself."
So another episode gone, and it was a good one. We'll be back again very soon, and we'll be talking about the Dauphin. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. To answer the inherent question of the episode, 5.1 inches.
The average is higher than that, isn't it?
No?
5.1 inches.
Correct.
This is the best moment in all of podcasting history. We discussed the measure of a man. Did we talk about how big Data's penis might be when he had sex with Tasha, or should we talk about that important issue now?
I like to think that, like a vacuum cleaner, it's extendable.
Well, they say he was the culmination of one man's dream, and...
Who's Larry Grayson?
You know, why build an android with a penis anyway?
So that they can fit in better with their Italian crewmates.